So welcome to CAP's Artist Talks. Here today with Maha Al Asaker, Kuwaiti visual artist and photographer, and Kuwaiti architect and curator Mohammed Kassem. My name is Malak Suwaihel. I'm a writer, I'm a critical thinker and a curator by trade, and I have a background in art, history, philosophy, and literature. So I'd like to start today with a quick introduction. So visuals are a language. Photographs constitute a grammar or coded system of communication saturated with the trappings of power, ultimately governed by a masculine gaze that frames in its own image our collective material reality. When we think of the body, the primary human form, that body is masculine. Pronoun he with a capital H to its proliferating lowercase signifiers of the common man, imperious in all disciplines of science, art, literature, philosophy, and near impervious to change. Episteme after episteme, woman's presence, her contributions are ahistoricized alternatives at the margins of the annals of history with a capital H. Where is woman in this reality that systemically and discernibly obfuscates her? Kuwaiti visual artist and photographer Maha Al Asaker, in her latest exhibition, My Name is Woman, curated by architect and artist Mohammed Kassem, contends with the seemingly polarizing and at times contentious question of woman. My Name is Woman, an exhibition featuring the oeuvre, a veritable series of Maha's past and present work, names that which has been obscured, the feminine voice and woman's form. So my perception of your work, Maha, is that from a female perspective, a woman that is grappling for an unencumbered sense of self beyond her exile in the infantilized domestic space, one that is mutable in the masculine real world, quote unquote. Woman's self-realization is her struggle to look beyond the trappings of a mirror that frames her within a masculine world image. So let's begin our conversation. So again, just a very short quote just to set the stage for us. I'd like to quote T.J. Clark, an art historian, on the condition of artistic creation. So it reads, "It ought to be clear by now that I'm not interested in the social history of art as part of a cheerful diversification of the subject, taking its place alongside other varieties, formalist, modernist, sub-Freudian, filmic, feminist, radical, all of them hot foot in the pursuit of what is new. For diversification, we're going to read that as disintegration." So Maha, for your series of photographs titled Self-Still Life from 2019, A Trap Called the Body from 2013, to Resistance is Female in 2013, on this note of diversification and disintegration, so to deconstruct and to reconstruct, can you reflect more on this conscious choice to bring together various past works into a single cohesive exhibition, My Name is Woman?
I think I will start with this question that it's always bothered me. It's how can I identify myself? I think from like early ages, I knew that I'm different than my family. The way how I see the world, the way how I question, like whenever I question like the elders, like they will give me like very weird answers, just go away. So I learned just to keep my thought for myself, and I'm not them, and it's okay. Growing up, the idea of like, am I my culture? Am I like a collective of what happened around me, like my environment? So the question of identity is like, it's like very broad questions, but I think I realized that I am all of that. I am the observer, I am the experience, and I am the reflector on that experience. So from there, I start my work basically about my personal experience, my struggle, my thoughts also. And then through the work, I realized my experience is not individual experience. It's a collective experiences. So there is experiences where you only have that if something or situation that happened to you, so no one can understand except you. But I realized through my work that other women will come to me and they relate. And that's why I call the exhibition My Name is Women. Because I'm talking about the collective experience that women share, whether it's here, whether it's like in the West, it's all similar. There is traits that we still share together. And as question why I put all these work together, so this is my first solo exhibition in my own country. I had a solo exhibition in the State, I had exhibitions in London, Abu Dhabi, and Dubai, and I was like, I want to reintroduce myself to my community, and because the work all is connected in a way, because it tackles the subject of women.
Right. So Mohammed, I'll pose the same question to you as curator then. So can you talk to us more about the structural mapping of the space, keeping in mind what Maha was talking about in terms of bringing that from the West to the East, and this being her first exhibition here in Kuwait?
Yeah, so it was very interesting when we started the process because Maha wanted basically to showcase as much of her work as possible, and the only thing that we knew, or at least had some intuition towards, is that the showcase is going to tackle the issue of being a woman and sort of Maha's experience on how it's both singular and monolithic, and it sort of encompasses the experience of all women, but also is very personal and intimate. So I initially asked Maha to see all of her work, including work that is not published, not on her website. And I saturated myself in the work, came to the space, and then immediately started to think of how do we start to select work in a way that is non-chronological, in a way that is that creates temperatures and creates a kind of spectrum of experiences. It has a gravitational pull, so there's specific orientations and alignments that kind of pull you into the space and then release you. So as you arrive to the exhibition is not presented as art, but rather as text. And then the flow of the space kind of pulls you into this derive, this like kind of Flanneurian experience of curiosity, and it also is non-linear, so you can kind of choose to linger as it makes sense. The tonality of the work, both in subject but also in medium and in color, was something that we really wanted to play with. So that there's this constant reminder of skin and body and kind of this intimacy and proximity. So there's not a large open space, but rather this kind of compression in the space to kind of force people close to the work and to contemplate it as episodes within a broad project, within a practice, as opposed to a linear, more conventional exhibition structure.
You touch on the body, which brings me to my next question, this mind-body paradigm that perhaps we can delve more into when we talk about things like somatic feminism, which, if defined, is a way of thinking that centers the body, not just the mind, as an arena for self-expression beyond the restrictions of what you were talking about, these hierarchies of power that pit mind against body, that pit man against woman, and so on. So my question to you, Maha, then, in response to that is, you lay the groundwork for a body-centered approach in your work. So, for example, A Trap Called Feminism, that series from 2019, which is in display here. You incorporate textual designs and embroidery alongside portraits of a young woman, long dark hair, very Arab. Her expressions are both reflexive and contemplative, but at the same time, she's quite pensive. So what she's doing is sort of gazing back rather than that masculine gaze that we talked about earlier. So can you sort of talk more about that textual element on the one hand, and then that woman looking back?
So,
at the viewer?
so when we start talking about the female body, like the first things come to mind is like women bodies always being sexualized, and that's the gaze toward her. I started this work in 2018 so I started with a series of photographs called a trap called Body, and I wanted to talk about female sexuality without nudity. So usually these kind of topics involve like nudity, because when you are nude you are vulnerable and you are showing like your intimate body. But then when you work, I'm also thinking about my viewer. How can I speak? Because this topic I wanted to, like, it's really directed to the Arab community. So how can I speak about body and sexuality without nudity? So I went to literature. I went to the simple of, like, let's say the fruits, sexual fruit. I used fabric, like silk, baby pink, like very feminine. And in that work, like the woman is gazing toward you, but you cannot see her because in front of her was a mirror reflecting a fruit. And that's also talking about society seeing you seeing them. So no one see her as a whole. They are seeing her for one function only. And this work, it's really frustration to talk about body with censorship. Like, how can I speak about something while I am censored? So it made me think about like the concept jasadi kafani, and that's where the embroidery work came. So I start to think about the body. Like, احنا قاعد نتحرك بجسمنا, we go and everything, but we don't talk to our own body. We don't thank our body. We don't understand our body. We're just like taking it for granted. So in my own process of trying to connect with my own body, I start to think about how we are souls and to this world, and then we are human and we need the body, and then when you die, it's just like they take your body and it wanders back to the land. And then I thought about my body as a trap, as like I always need to cover. There's different sensors to my body depending on which country I am in and who is around me. So I started taking the kafan fabric, the cotton, and then I used natural dye. I wanted to add the element of skin, so I used the avocado skin to add the layer of skins, and then I start to use my own hair, because I collect my hair, because why not? And then and then use word to describe. So I want to create, like, how can I talk about something that is, it's censored, but it's very intimate. So this is the way how sometimes the words help. I feel like the work depends on, like, I tap into different things between photography, between natural dye, embroidery. It depends on the project. I will go with it. Yeah.
That works well, I guess, with what we spoke about earlier in terms of space for a woman, right? So for me, at least, Maha, and I'm sure for many, your art is a clear attempt at carving out a space in the greater cultural context of Kuwait for your own unique expression on the one hand, but by extension, and at least incrementally, you are adding to the tapestry of Kuwaiti women's forms of expression. So I guess the most prominent example of that was your first photo book that you've published, Women in Kuwait. So it was a series of portraits of 25 Kuwaiti women in their most intimate and private quarters, their bedrooms. So for you, Maha, why emphasize women in their particular domains and spaces of expression? Why that?
I mean, if you think about women and think about our culture, it's always like women are sheltered. Everybody want to save them, protect them, as if they don't have a voice or they don't know how to speak up. And then, growing up, you just follow the rules. Even if you have a voice, you're just like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know how to open the door or whatever. So it's a culture thing. So When I did this work, I was in the States, and I started to figure out how being a modern Muslim, cultured, Kuwaiti, Arab woman is so confusing to the West. And I wanted to just sit without explaining myself. So I started thinking of this. It was only a series of images, then transformed into a book.
Yeah.
And when I wanted to photograph these women, and that was like kind of my first personal work that I'm not the subject, because usually it's always self-portrait. I closed my eyes and tried to think about the Kuwaiti women. I start to think of makeup, brand, luxury, very like, you know, on top of everything. But these are all facade. This is what we project to the world, and I wanted to show the real woman. And so I knew that I didn't want to have makeup. I don't want them to dress up. But then I thought of the space.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be in a studio where I isolate them from the environment. And I start to think about the way how we live. So we live as a collective family. No one live alone here. So we live with our parents. If you're married, you still either live with, if you're male, you stay at your father. If you're a woman, you go to his home. So there's always like a home like with a lot of people. The only place that it's your bedroom.
Yeah.
And bedroom is like the place where you can close your door. It's just like, I don't want to deal with anyone. And it's also have this kind of clue who you are, because that's the only space that you can decorate it the way you want. And it will tell if you're single, you're a mom. And I also wanted to play on the curious. I wanted to push the limit with people, because I'm asking them to open the door for me. So I'm questioning the concept of privacy, that the place is supposed to be private. But then people use their phone now and photograph everything, but still bedrooms are very sexual and it's very private. These women trusted me where I came there and kind of opened the door to the world to see their own world.
But also on their own terms, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So in a way, it became sort of this collaborative, communal, artistic project where self-expression, women's voice, women's form was highlighted. In the Kuwaiti context, for once.
All these women trusted me to photograph them, trusted me in the way how I will see them and how I will show them to the world.
Yeah. So, Mohammed, by the same token, in terms of like women's space, I'd like to read a quote by Jane Rebdell that might resonate with you, I think. So, quote, "As material culture, space is not intimate and inert, measured geometrically, but an integral and changing part of daily life, intimately bound up in social and personal rituals and activities." So beyond the geometry of space, as an architect and curator, Mohammed, how has Maha's centering of women's experience influenced the spatial ordering of the exhibition, if at all? But through my perspective, I guess it would be that alternative feminine orientation of space and its navigation that perhaps affected the way you created that space.
Yeah, it started with kind of this, I guess, observation that I had about architecture and about space making, that in conventional practices of architecture, the way that we generate space is patriarchal, and it prioritizes a kind of masculine understanding of space. It's about an immediate understanding of a space, and it has to present itself in its totality immediately. There isn't a lot of nuance or subtext in the way that kind of the patriarchy wants to perceive space, and that it creates these compartments, like the bedroom, that kind of traps people and domestifies them.
Yeah. Compartmentalizes.
Compartmentalizes.
Yeah.
So we wanted to kind of bring this intimacy of domesticity, but to think of it in a more feminine, less masculine sense.
Yeah.
So it's about this kind of nesting of spaces. It's about a layering of spaces.
Yeah.
The exhibition started with the table,
Yeah.
interestingly
I was going to
enough.
ask, you centered the dining room table, not the bedroom.
Correct.
Why?
So the dining room table, in terms of a domestic environment, is one that is public. It is one that a domestic unit kind of presents itself in its best performance.
Yeah.
People dress up, people kind of showcase themselves in their best image.
Mm.
But then the embroidery pieces speak of the kind of trauma of language that gets offloaded, and it's this terrible oppressive weight that people feel comfortable at kind of discarding at the dining table.
Mm.
So we wanted to take that notion of a dining table, but then make it intimate, make it something that is visually deprived of context. So by painting the walls black, by focusing the light onto the table, we're kind of bringing the attention to the dialogue at the table, as opposed to the social performative spectacle of dining, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is such a colonial thing to think of the dining as this kind of hall. It's a great hall. It's where people come to socialize and to exchange ideas, but then the ideas that are being exchanged are not ones that move the dial forward, and they're not ones of empowerment, but rather of repression and control.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the starting point. And then the walls that create the intimacy of space become the structure that supports the work that surrounds it. The room in the back is more intended to mimic a bedroom with the mirror and the embroidery piece hanging in front of it.
Yeah.
That speaks of the mirror, and it sort of the reclamation of, I get like to reclaim the mirror as something that is about contemplation and introspection, as opposed to a vessel or a tool at which you would put on a facade. So it's not about the makeup. It's not about sitting in front of the mirror to correct your appearance for people's perception, but rather this kind of moment of intimacy within an exhibition space. It's there's no external context at that point in the exhibition. You're purely in the interior, yet you're not in the full interior of the dining. So that speaks again to the layering of the spaces and the sequence. And we also wanted the exhibition to kind of flow in both directions, that as you enter it and you walk through the space, there's a perception of the work.
It's not linear.
It's not linear. And then as you see the dining table, it recontextualizes the work that is supported on the outside and gives you a new perspective. So there's a desire to kind of re-engage as opposed to just leave the room.
All right, so on that note of like contextualizing, our favorite subject in Kuwait, let's talk censorship. So this goes out to both of you, but in the Kuwaiti context, particularly in its art and its creative industries, in what ways do you find yourselves having to censor your work on the one hand, and how have these subsequent alternatives that you've created from this censored work affected your means and modes of artistic expression?
I mean, like usually in any project I do the work, I have the thoughts, I write, and then execute, show it to only specific people, and then show it to the world and just let it set. Because there is like my point of view and then the viewer point of view, and I'm fine with that. I feel like the first time I realized that I myself censor myself when I had this conversation with this friend, an artist, like maybe 6 years ago, and just like casual, it's like, you know, like I was like, every time I make a new work, I think, what would my mom say if she see that? And I realized like subconsciously I am censoring myself, although I thought it's like, I'm free, I do whatever I want, I am hippie, whatever, I'm not. And that was the first experience. I had like a huge fight with my mom. I was happy that time I wasn't living with her in the same space, I was in the state. And after many arguments, because she didn't like the photos that I was posting, and she was asking me to delete them. It's like, you're naked. I was like, no, mom, I'm not naked. I'm just like showing my shoulders. This is not naked. I don't like the way how. So I told her to unfollow me. And that I feel like, and she still does, she unfollowed me and she followed Chico. So if I want to show her anything, I need to put it there so she knows what's happening in my life. And we are really in a good term.
That's good.
Because, yeah, so that's the first things where I saw the censorship. And I start to be aware of it. And when I did the huge tapestry piece that's in the exhibition, the big one, after I finished, after I think, I don't know, 50 hours of just doing these embroidery, I read it and I was shocked. I was like, damn, I cannot put this in Kuwait. They will not show it. So I was really frustrated. I was like, what should I do? Like, I wanted, like, my idea is to show this in Kuwait. So I decided to censor myself. So I wanted to have the bigger, like, I wanted to have control over them. So there was 2 words. So I decided to hide it with a thread. But then, if you are, like, curious, you can go and just peek there and see what's there. So I started to think about boundaries, censorship, and how to speak. So it's a bit harder.
Yeah.
But for me, I work better when you give me a limitation. Because my brain was like, okay, that's what I need to do. This is what I have. I will make it happen. Yeah.
Okay, so you found like sort of an advantageous or constructive learning curve through censorship.
Yeah, I think I always
Not many can say that. You're lucky.
I like always to look at the good sides. Like I take things as challenge.
Yeah.
Like, you challenge me, good.
That's
okay,
amazing.
you get my attention.
That's what makes you an artist.
Yeah.
Any experiences with censorship?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, especially with this exhibition.
Where did you hide the things?
Yeah, where did you hide everything?
Hide the things?
Yeah.
What was not there?
Yeah, I mean the selection of the work, right?
Yeah.
Like most of these projects are much broader than the kind of triptychs or the selection. But part of it was kind of in the same way that Maha wanted to have control. We wanted to choose how we censor, how we create subtext, how to move away from these binary definitions of is it good, is it bad, is it modest, is it provocative? And it's like, that's not for me to explicitly tell you how to perceive the work, but rather to allow you to have your own perception and to allow you to receive the work in your own capacity. And if you need to come once or twice or 10 times, that this is kind of the intent, right? Like an exhibition should be something, or exhibition space should be something that has a narrative, but also can withstand multiple experiences over time, over contemplation. I mean, I'm very happy that the show has been extended because I also, for me personally, revisiting the show, I keep seeing things that emerge just simply through the kind of subtext.
Right, yeah.
And like the decontextualization of work and then recontextualizing the work against other work.
Also like the text, like, so when we did everything there, like we know some of the work is a bit abstract and we were trying to think of
And
people.
was that intentional for it to be abstract?
I mean, because of the limitations, so some works are supposed to be abstract in a way. So it depends. Like in my case, yes, because I want the viewer to see my work. Because I can make, so there's some works that I do, I don't care if you want to see it or not. But like especially like, let's say the body, I wanted people to just look at it and question. And if that happened, that's good. Yeah. So what we did is we had like, I wanted also to play in the curiosity of people. So we also have some sort of zone that we have in our mind of the workflow. And then we have like a QR codes. And there you can see more and then you can reflect. But it's not necessary to have the experience. But if you want more, you can find it. Yeah. That's also another way to navigate things here.
Yeah. So in that vein of censorship, both of you have studied and worked abroad. So as Arabs and however else you would like to identify yourselves, how has your artistic labor and practice been perceived abroad? And can you comment on the scope of liberties and limitations experienced elsewhere? You from New York and yourself Chicago.
So I started like showing my work and practiced like to be an artist while I was there. And the first things I realized there that I was the other. I was always looked at I'm the other. And that, you know, they want to save me and I'm oppressed. And I mean, everybody has issues and I have my own issues, but I didn't need that. I was like, I wanted to express myself without explanation, but I realized that if I'm there, I need to explain. If I'm here, I need to censor. And I kind of try to find a balance where I have freedom there, but I'm also always the other. And how can I talk? It's also like anything I do will be within this. But also like I find my voice there, like practicing my art there without the censored. It was basically, how can I find my voice? It was a process. I always feel like I was like chalk. I cannot talk, I cannot express, and I was censoring myself. It took a couple of years for me just to do the things, to be. And once I found my voice, I decided to come back to Kuwait.
Okay. Similar experience? Did you find your voice? Is that why you're here again?
I mean, it's interesting because like going through architecture school, it definitely was, you know, like I had an expectation about what architecture was, and I had been pre-exposed to architectural education through my family. My sister is an architect, and she kind of brought me into the profession and engaged my mind on kind of the positive aspect without showing me the kind of problematic nature of the discipline.
Yeah.
And the problematic nature
It's
is
colonial undertones.
yeah, that's just like it's extremely colonial and extremely misogynistic and extremely patriarchal, and prioritizes the kind of male experience and the kind of masculine experience. Because even today, with moving beyond these
What do buildings look like?
phallic symbols, but also in the kind of systems of organization, right?
Yeah.
Like they have to be so easy to understand, and they have to be sellable, and they have to be photographable, and they have to be these kind of plastic things that we could just look at and immediately grasp, and any complexity brought into the profession is immediately seen as a flaw in design, that it is not performing at capacity. And I always found that frustrating, because I'm like, why don't we attempt to decolonize architectural education? Why don't we move past this?
Are you doing that here?
I'm attempting to. I really am.
So what's it like here then?
Interestingly enough, because I feel like I'm not dealing with white, cisgendered, heteronormative men, it is actually much easier to use.
They act like it though.
They do, but they aren't. So they can't defend something that is not theirs.
Yeah.
So in an interesting way, I'm like inverting the savior complex, right? Like the white savior complex doesn't apply if you're not white. You can't save
That's
me.
true.
So defending a broken system of education is completely flawed, and it's so easy to just point that out.
Yeah. So what's the problem here? Ineptitude?
I think it's lack of commitment, the lack of interest, lack of intrigue, lack of curiosity.
Yeah.
They do want things to be easy and explicit and kind of sellable.
Yeah.
It's much easier to market the built environment when it's binary and plastic and resolved. It's much more difficult to talk about intimate experiences that attempt to deplatform the masculine and empower the feminine, and to kind of think about these as like experiences that are within a spectrum as opposed to singular binary experiences.
Yeah. So on that note, actually, let's talk more about identity politics. Let's define it first in order to like release the term from the rhetoric of mainstream news cycles, of current trends in tribalist political discourse, particularly here, the sensationalization of party politics. That's not what we're talking about. So in this sense, identity politics is when people of a particular race, ethnicity, gender, or religion form alliances and organize politically to defend their group's interests. The feminist movement is an example, the civil rights movement is another. So in that sense, Maha, do you see your work as inherently political because it centers the minority voice of women, despite how many might see it as like a limited scope, or they might limit the scope of your work as visual work that defies conventional Kuwaiti traditions and norms?
I mean, everything in the world is political. Like,
thank you.
if you want to go and buy like a bottle of water, you just think about, do I go to Jamia or I go to like a fancy baqala? Everything is, there is agenda for everything, and we make a lot of decisions based on that. So the way how my work is, and I think many artists, I make the word because there's something reckoning on my head. There is something, it's just taking space on my head that I need to respond to it. And I do my research, I do my work, and once the work is there, then it's not mine. I have my agenda, I did something, but then the viewer can see what they want to see. If they want to see it in like, I'm a man hater, because a lot of people said that to me about me.
All feminists are man haters, right?
I was like, come on, like, and then some of them will ask me, it's like, yeah, but why you don't talk about about men here in Kuwait? It's like, sure, there is a lot of things. I feel bad for you guys. I mean, they taught you since you were kids, like, don't cry, you're a man. But I'm not a man. I don't know what is this experience means.
Can you tell us about the experience you had coming to terms with, the labeling yourself as feminist? That's an interesting story.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So I feel like the first time I had like an interview with this magazine when I was in the States, and they labeled all my work as like, you're a feminist. I was like, no. And I was like freaking out. I was like, why? And then I sat with her and I like explained for her, like maybe for 15 minutes, it's like why I'm not a feminist. And I'm just like, she was like, but that is, again, we forget the power of the words, and الكلام لما especially from people are close to you, they become like engraved in your body. So, and then I start to remember that, like, okay, my mom, I mean, I talk about her a lot because she's my big feminist, but like everybody has their own experience. I remember her like cursing Nawal al-Saadawi and Qasim Amin, وهذول اللي خربوا الحريم وهذول. So I was like, it's what I was afraid of is not my idea, it's what I have back in my brain. So I was like, you know what? Let's see who's Nawal al-Saadawi. And I just start seeing her video. I'm in love with her. Yes, I'm a feminist. And yes, I understand how, like, she's amazing. Like, what she did is no one can do. Like, an organization cannot do what she did to the woman, to the Arab woman.
Yeah. So having said that, do you draw a line between what is art and what is activism?
I think I will go up again. I feel like like the way how I see it, I fought for everything. I fought for everything I have in my life. Nothing was given to me. And I will keep fighting because someone needs to do that. And if this is my life, if I am alive today, I want to enjoy like my day. I want to enjoy tomorrow. I don't want someone to tell me don't and do or what a woman's supposed to be, because at the end it's my own experience. Why you are ruining it to me? If you don't like me, just go away.
Sure. I kind of want to play devil's advocate then on that note. Do you see that there is value in shocking an audience? So by that I mean either being deliberately salacious or being socially offensive within your content, just to poke.
I mean, I don't speak, like I speak about myself.
Yeah.
I mean,
within the context of your work.
I never intend to shock anybody. I'm in peace with my thought, and I like to share my thought with you guys. That's it.
Yeah.
So
it's as simple as that.
That's it.
Yeah. So Mohammed, how does this question of identity and activism factor in through your curation of Maha's work?
I mean, I think the most obvious is that the show is called My Name is Woman, and I'm assigned male at birth.
Inherently political, yeah.
So that in itself was
like
kind of a challenge. And I'm not delusional about this reality, but I also grew up in a household with 4 elder sisters, and being the youngest of 5 and seeing their kind of struggle with society and some of the hardships domestically, and just like that growth and breaking through the shackles of what is kind of assigned to us as opposed to what is ours to take.
Yeah.
But then also like conversations with Maha where I started to understand that, to your point, to your provocative question, I think that it's very easy to be vulgar and to be explicit. And I think that there's complexity and political savvy into doing a show that speaks of this experience and of this narrative, and to not have it be shut down and censored. And that it shows that in kind of the savviness, I guess, or the subtext, or the non-explicit nature of the presentation of the work, it just managed to exist.
Yeah.
And it provoked people to say that you hate men, and that you're a feminist, or that you're not a feminist, and you hate women because you think of them in this way. And then I've also for people to be like, well, if you're a feminist, why didn't you bring a man to curate? I mean, why did you bring a man to curate? Like these, you know, like these questions are very challenging, but I feel like that goes back to the binary. It's so easy to label someone as good or bad because of these just superficial, surface level readings of people, collaboration, work, and an understanding of kind of art as artifice, as opposed to art as object or product.
Yeah, or subject for that matter, yeah. So on that note, Maha, you and I talk about privilege a lot, whether we have it, whether we don't, whether it even matters to begin with. So being of a particular race, class, gender, etc., to a lesser degree, defines the social currency of an individual. You and I agree on that, at least. So especially in a place like Kuwait as well. So I guess this question is for the both of you. Can you speak more on the question of privilege? How does privilege factor in creating such a show, like the one we see here today, that centers women's experiences in a way that is perhaps generally censored? And has this question of privilege influenced the ethos or conception of My Name is Woman?
I mean, I think I will say again, like, I'm different than my family, and I feel like a lot of you here are always like, there is always someone who doesn't fit the family, and then doesn't fit the extended family, and then what to do with that. And that's how we live. I think younger me, I wanted to fit in, so I was like, okay, everything I say cause problem, then just let's see, and because I love you guys. So maybe I'm bad. So it's like, let's do that. And I think in my 20s, one day, I was in my bed and I couldn't leave. I was there for like 10 days. I think I was depressed. And then I started to figure out why. Because like on paper, I was in like perfect life. Hachiko, hold on. Sorry. Want to sit down? So, and then I figure out that my life, it's only good on paper, so I start to fight, and I fought for everything I have. There is nothing given to me, even the right, like the way, like the right to just travel in one way, and also how to do something and keep your family with you. That was like the challenge. So I don't know, it's very complicated, but it's a fight.
Yeah. Words on privilege.
How are you defining privilege in this context? I'm curious.
Just the social currency of being able to do whatever you want. Just put it simply.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting...
Financial privilege, social privilege.
Yeah. Like
educational privilege.
The notion of accessibility and kind of like having the space to accommodate this conversation is, I guess,
in
to
itself,
a degree, privilege.
Inherently privileged. Yeah.
And I think that it puts a lot of pressure because there's a lot of people that are trying to tell their story.
Yeah.
And not everyone is at that time in their life where they're ready, or their work is ready, or the institution is ready to receive them. And I feel like this was just a kind of happy coincidence, like a strange cosmic alignment, where Maha and I got to reconnect after a decade of meeting each other in New York for coffee. And it just became so intimate, and it felt like a family bond. There was no holds barred. There was nothing that was kind of left unsaid out of fear of rejection or disappointment or frustration. And I'm grateful for this collaboration, for this experience, because I think that more often than not, curatorial work in Kuwait is treated as you're just going to help me choose how to hang the work on the wall.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Save that. Yeah.
So like I think yeah, like in terms of that, I feel like it was a wonderful opportunity. It was a wonderful opportunity to kind of use this privilege and not waste the opportunity.
Yeah. So then let's talk about your demographic. If you were at least here in the opening, did you have a particular audience in mind? What were the kind of people that were coming in?
I feel like, you know, when you show in an exhibition, so it's so there's different way. There's a street art that where you use like public space, and that would be for bigger people. I think he's bored. And when you do the exhibition, then it's for selective people who are interested in art, who's interested in the topic. So that usually are the.
But you were talking to a general scope of women through your art. So were you hoping that different demographics of people would come rather than, we see the familiar faces every now and again.
Of course. But then with art, you cannot force people. It's something you are interested in or not. It's like sport.
Yeah. Is there a way that maybe we can breach those communities?
Public art, connecting art with school.
Yeah, that's important.
Having more exhibition, because the problem is here that we are segregated. Like there's like school and teachers, but then there's artists, and then there is employee. There's no connection. I think it's the best way is to start with like linking the like artists and kids, and then you start to create people, because there's not
there aren't any grassroots movements here that are even interested. That's true.
Yeah, and also like
so you're starting from the ground up.
Yeah, because we don't have museums, we don't have these kind. It's new here.
Yeah, it is new.
So you always go to the kids.
It is new. Yeah, but in regards to education, Mohammed, let's talk about curation on that front. So curation itself is an art that is erroneously slated and diminished as simply the organization or the assembly of an artist's particular oeuvre of work. So can you elaborate more on the inner mechanizations of working intimately with an artist like Maha, and what is implied in this laborious construction of an art exhibition on the one hand, and how does the role of education in an art institutions factor? So in regards to like curation as a form of knowledge and practice to be taught.
I mean, it's like you said, I guess the standard definition of a curator's task or job is to simply accessorize a gallery space with the work as it's presented. And I feel like that the challenge for me is to fully immerse into the work and to fully saturate myself in it. Although I did not go to art school, architecture school does have an element of curation in regards to our final presentations. So as you go through the program and you end up at let's say your thesis project or higher levels in the education system, the quantity of work is not such that you could just kind of put it all up on the wall and have it be something that's digestible. So there was a lot of like learning how to put together booklets, how to group work, how to understand work beyond narrative, that there are techniques in color, tone, scale, framing, composition, movement that create flow and then create interest so people want to engage the work, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that was one of the things that in particular this show allowed us to do, was that we had a breadth of work. So it was actually, the challenge was choosing what work was to be featured, and then what that entailed in terms of the systems of organization. So the room was empty when we first walked in. There were no partitions, there was nothing. And the energy of the room immediately would pull you towards the back offices because it was such a strong axial alignment with the entrance.
Okay.
So the first thing we knew we wanted to do was block that. So we blocked it structurally, but then it was like, okay, now we have a strong axial condition. What do we do we put the strongest tapestry to pull people into the space.
Yeah.
So there was this constant dialogue of like, all right, we have an existing context that isn't performing in a way that creates visual interest and intrigue and kind of this curiosity to explore. How do we create the interest, but in a way that isn't superficial and in a way that isn't prioritizing itself over the art? So that was the kind of challenge, is to let the artwork generate the space and then the space kind of supports it. And there's a symbiosis between the two aspects.
Yeah.
It's not I'll just scatter art on the wall.
Yeah.
But also it's not I'll create the most complex spatial experience and then I'll put art on the wall.
Okay. My final question now goes to, no, I'm just kidding. If the audience, we'd like to open the floor to questions from the audience.
Yes, hi. It's not a question, just a comment. بخصوص the project you did about the women in their bedrooms. وايد حلو, I loved it. But it's an idea, يعني, just an idea. I'm sure you thought about it. Would you consider doing part 2, women in their bathrooms? Seriously, well, then it's much harder to conceal like a true in the bathrooms instead of their bedrooms. It's a way. I'm sure you thought about it, right? It's harder to do كل شيء.
I think that's your project, not mine.
Just an idea, man. Well, I know it's hard, but I'm sure.
Anyone else?
It's cool that has here.
So? Yeah, just do it.
Me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, sure. بس أنت أشطر مني بس لا.
Thank you for your elaborate talk. My question is out of curiosity, really. So I'm asking about, when you talk about your art, do you feel that what you said was enough?
I feel like art, it's about a conversation. I mean, writer put his thought into a text, and artist depends on the medium. You translate it into a work. I feel also, I mean, enough. What is enough?
Well, when I say enough, I mean that when I see your art, when I see any artist's art, I feel things that are way more than what he or she is telling me about.
Yeah, that's correct. So that's what I was trying to say before. So the artist's work is to produce the work with an agenda, but not necessarily the viewer will have the same agenda. You just let it go, because your experience is different than my experience. So if me and you looking at the same thing, this chair, I will remember, like, this chair might remind me of something else. Maybe you see the form and the structure because like you are an architect or something. So it's the same goes with the art. Everybody have their own experience, and you need to allow that to happen.
And you said something brilliant, that art is a language. Actually, there are studies that art predated language, and it was paved the road for the development of language.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any more questions?
Hello, Maha.
Hi.
Chico and Mohammed. I want to know what, because you were talking about the conversation, right? So how did you change that conversation, the Maha that started the collection and right now?
How to change?
How did it change you? Do you have a different conversation right now?
Yeah, it's a different conversation, because when you do the work, you hope for something, but sometimes things goes different direction. Usually when I do something, my brain starts to think about something else. Like, I feel like the conversation is, how can I say it? I don't know, I'm just lost with my thoughts.
Actually, I have a question that might help. Okay, so you deal with a lot of organic material, for instance, like dyeing and fabric and fruits and people. So that's a lot of things that can go, wherever they want, as opposed to you having an initial plan. And I mean, it's an obvious question to say when you start with a project and then you end with something that's different from what you intend for it to be. But have you ever changed your mind at the end? Like you start with a certain conviction or belief, and then you end with something different? I know it sounds very simple and obvious, but like consider like this is a question coming from a very anal retentive person. So
I mean,
something as explanatory as possible.
I mean, the thing is about us as a human, we always want to control everything, okay? And we always know everything, even though we don't know anything. And through the process, of course, as I said, like you have a concept, you have something bothering you, you start reading, you start looking, and a lot of time things change in between. I feel like the best work is when I start just not to think or not to plan everything, just go with my intuition. I describe my work as more intuitive. I have things in my mind, but I allow the process to take me left and right. And that's when a good work, like for me, happen.
Anything else?
Just a simple question about the symbols you use in your. I need to just to from yourself to explain how you use this apple. I noticed that you use the apple in 3 or 4 maybe pictures or drawings.
Yeah.
Why? How you understand this? It is the same or something else? You explain, you use the textile of the kafan for some purpose or some reasons.
Yeah.
Of understanding of something also a vision to the woman also. How you use this apple? If you can.
Yeah, sure. So basically, that work, the 3 photograph, I'm talking the project called a trap called the Body, and I'm trying to talk about like how women is always like. I mean, I was talking also about like virginity and how everybody is controlling, and the society and they're emphasizing a lot about of female bodies, that like it's a collective, but they treat it as one, and how like a man can do whatever because he's a man, شايل عيبة, but if a woman did something خلاص العائلة كلها راحت. So at the end, the female body, it's not her own body, like every woman carrying her family, شرف العائلة كلها عليها هي. So that's a lot of pressure. So how can I talk about that? So I'm using the symbol of fruits, and that's the symbol as the apple. And if you see the 3 images, so there is one with a mirror. So if you look at her, it's what society see the apple, they don't see her. And the other one, she was like there with the plastic wrapping her to just make sure she will be protected and pure. And then the last one where she was eating her own fruit, and so I was trying to talk about these kind of topics there.
Yeah, then it's just a fruit, no relation to Adam and Hawa.
No. But it also goes to the symbol of the apple, that when he went there and he ate the apple, that's also goes to it. Yes, it does. Anyway.
All right, I think we'll end on that strong note. Thank you everyone for coming out.